Annie first, and then we go down the list. So say
Okay.
your name, pronouns, um, whatever you like to, I guess, say about yourself. Yeah.
Okay.
Then we
Hi,
end with
my
Yeti.
name is Annie. My pronouns are she, her. I've been observing Valorant for, I think, about 4 months now. And I mostly do primary, but I want to get into more free cam work too. And yeah, that's about it.
Dope. We love to hear that. Yeah, Annie's dope. She also has a image of flaming hot cheaters, which is kind of debating my existence. So
It's me.
she's my
It's my
kryptonite.
face.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Just hot Cheetos. Just hot Cheetos. Okay.
Oh, I'm
Betty?
next.
Yes, yes.
Hi, I'm Betty. I started observing Valorant about like 8 or 9 months ago, and um, yeah, I mainly do primary because free camming kind of makes my head hurt, and yeah, that's me.
Dope. Okay. Delta, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, I'm Lynn, but I mostly go by Delta, and I started observing with Valorant earlier this year, and I do primarily, well, I feel like I've done a mix, but primarily first person, and I do second or third person as well, but I haven't really done any TD work before, so I'd definitely be interested in asking about that. And then I've also been dabbling in Halo as of recent as well.
Awesome. So I'm not quite sure how to like conclude these. Like, okay, Sophie.
Oh, what's
Uh,
up? Oh,
Oh, there's two
I
Sophies.
honestly,
I'm so
I'm
sorry. I'm so
sorry.
sorry. I'm so sorry. EU
Oh no.
Sophie. EU
I-
Sophie.
Hey, I'm Sophie, or Neutrino. I started observing in September. I've only done solo observing so far because it's mostly sort of like smaller gigs. But free camming really excites me. I'm getting well, I have controllers like back home, but like I'm a student, so don't have one with me right now. So I'm really excited to get into that. But yeah, glad to be here.
Hey,
Okay.
I'm Keely or Sappho, whatever you want to call me. Doesn't really matter. Uh, and I do Freecam TD as well, full time. Well, mostly. I don't know. Benno, who's also on Pog servers. Also, or Ben a lot, I suppose, is my POV duo. She's phenomenal, really great. But yeah,
Hi, I'm Skittles. I'm she, her. I started in March, so I think about 9 months ago, and I am primary observer currently, but I'm hoping to get some cinematic experience too now.
Alright, I'm Sophie, NA Sophie, or I guess Soph is fine. Soph is fine too, seeing as that might be a little hard to differentiate between. She, her is fine. I don't know. I started observing in like October, so kind of new. Pretty much only POV observing. Eventually, I guess I'd want to do like a third person or free cam, and then oh yeah, I also kind of I've learned how to, and like I have done some producing, although that really stresses me out because I'll probably forget something. Yeah.
Facts. Producing is rough. Okay. Betty, can you start recording so we can get Yeti's introduction?
Oh, I've been recording since
Oh, dope.
we did instruction.
Awesome. That's what I was thinking, but I didn't really communicate. So I'm glad we're on the same like
All
page.
good,
Like,
all good.
all good. Uh, on day streams, Tasia, POV, secondary. Uh, yeah. So a little bit of Pog servers. So Pog servers just like is a community for women and non-binary production peeps. It really only started with like 4 people, and then we've grown a lot. And it's become a little safe place for us to all chat. But we also want this a place to like grow our skills and skill sets. And sometimes it's sometimes hard to do that when a lot of us are kind of inexperienced in a sense, and a lot of us have just been sharing our advice um, back and forth to kind of gain more inside of the esports industry. So I'm really happy that you're here, Yeti. Um, and without further ado, Yeti, introduce yourself a little bit. Be dope.
Alrighty. My name is Nicholas Teslin, or I also go by Yeti. I am a freelance broadcast observer, esports observer. I primarily do free cam as well as in-game directing, but I hop on POV every now and again if the opportunity arises. I've been observing Valorant specifically pretty much since day one of the beta. Because yeah, day one when I got my code, I was pretty much just looking for pug servers to instantly start observing in. So, been doing it pretty much since the beginning. I've been involved in esports in general for about 3 years now, or probably 3 years as of this last September. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. I know I've spoken with a few of you already, but it's nice to meet all you guys for the first time or second time or so on.
Dope. Sorry, It's so weird to like. It's not okay. Wait. When did beta come out? Like 2 years ago? When?
Uh,
It only
it was
turned a
like
year and a
year
bit.
and a half.
Beta was April 2020.
There
So
you go.
yeah, damn it, heart of COVID.
Damn.
I was like, April 2020. I had to like think really hard. I'm like, what year is it now? When is 20? Okay, that's dope. We're gonna start with the questions. Uh, Sophie, do you want to ask the first one?
Yeah, I can do that.
Go.
Me. All right. So first question: how can I gain confidence in my observing?
All right, cool. So this one I feel is going to be it's like a little bit of a tough question, because like I guess like a lot of just like like confidence is your own like mentality and like knowing your own ability, uh, to be able to do what you like can do as an observer. Um, at least for me, I've always sort of just been laid back enough where I've never personally had like confidence being an issue. I've had moments of like having butterflies or, being a little bit just like nervous about how I'm going to be able to perform for a show. But for the most part, I've sort of just like beat into my own mind that like I just need to like focus in and like work on what I got to work on. So I think probably the biggest thing for gaining confidence in what you're going to do is just allowing yourself to like be enthralled by everything that you are doing and just like focusing in deep on your objective and what you want to do while you're observing. I don't know if that's the easiest answer to get a hold of, or to like take and learn from, but that's sort of just what ended up working for me.
Do you think VOD viewing helps gain that confidence too? Hmm.
Yeah, I'd say like at least for me when I was like starting with like Valorant, like when Valorant was like brand new. Obviously there was no like baseline or understanding for like how Valorant was supposed to be observed or showcased. So I guess like I gained a lot of confidence just through like trial and error and realizing like, oh, this works. And like once I know it works, I no longer like doubt or like second guess like what I'm doing. But definitely like VOD reviewing, especially your own stuff, and like going over your own work and being like, okay, I liked what I did here. I don't like what I did here. I think what I showed here made sense, or what I showed here didn't make sense. So that you can almost reflect on that, or think of that, or keep that in the back of your mind for like future um, like live shows will like help with that confidence boost.
I have a follow-up question to that. Um, so you've worked on some very big events that I'm sure you're really excited for, but also potentially maybe a little nervous. I'm wondering, um, do you have anything that you do to kind of hype yourself up or like calm your nerves before, if you get any, before an event that's really big or something you're really excited about?
So I'd say like prior to a big event, I always get this like giddiness to me where I'm just like really excited for what I'm about to do. Um that usually like fades fairly quickly when the time does come. I sort of like put myself into this mentality like when I'm like getting ready to observe or like as things are happening, or like as we're about to jump into lobby, where I sort of realize that it's also like a job, and I need like I'm basically telling and forcing myself to put myself into like a mindset of like what I'm about to do is technically work. So that sort of grounds me in reality a little bit, where I'm not like overly nervous about certain things or overthinking what I'm about to do. One thing I sort of do to just get myself into the feel of things is I try to surround myself with the I guess the vibe that Valorant gives off. So for like bigger LAN events, they do like a lot of like rehearsals for like the walkouts and stuff, and that usually they play like a signature song or some sort of music that's like very attuned with like the Valorant brand or Valorant as a whole. So like the biggest example being like the "Die for You" song that came out for Champions recently. I'll tend to try to just go around the stage when I'm at events like that to like get myself in the mood. Or if I'm doing like remote work, I'll try to like listen to music that's involved with like Valorant or the show that I'm on in general. So um, for a lot of like the bigger Valorant shows, they use like a lot of electronic music like Odessa, Jai Wolf and stuff like that. Um, I think what was it? I'm blanking out. I often listen to a lot of like league music that comes out that Riot puts out for like the like Worlds finals and stuff. Because those like really get you in like the mood. You know what I mean? Like those like champion songs and stuff. So like I guess prior to sort of psych myself up a bit, or to get myself like really enthralled with what I'm about to do, I'll like listen to that kind of music. And I think that's partially just a second nature thing that I do because I used to play football, and like it was a very common thing to just listen to music before a football game to like really get you like amped up for it. So just like getting into that mental space of being like, this is like the Valorant music, this is the Valorant brand, listening to the music that is associated with it, watching the like hype trailers and getting excited about those hype trailers can help get you into that same sort of feeling for it.
So I have a follow-up question along the lines of confidence. So when you aren't like performing your best and you might get like tilted at how the beginning of a match is going, how do you personally kind of try to overcome that?
So the one thing I've done that's worked really, really well, and I only really discovered this like during like the first time I did a Masters event, like the remote Masters one. Because there's definitely been moments where I've fucked up in timing. Oh, sorry if I am or I'm not allowed to swear. Realize that.
You
Um,
get. I mean, yes.
I just wasn't sure for the
Mm.
recording if that was cool or not. But yeah, I've definitely had my mistakes. And I've definitely been like down on those mistakes a lot. Actually, LCQ for NA was one of like my worst performances for a LAN event. Because I messed up timings and of like teams and the pacing of the game a lot. Um, but the one thing I sort of do to like reset my mental is understand that the way you build a story as an observer is on a round by round basis. So at the beginning of a round, I can sort of tell myself to be like, whatever happened last round is no longer relevant, right? At least in terms of like me observing. There's nothing I can do to change what just happened. The only thing I can do is continue to look forward. So if I had a bad round or a bad game previously, I just tell myself to reset myself, like to bounce back for that next round. So if I had a bad round, that next round is my only focus. I don't think about what happened in the past. If I had a bad game, well, you know what? It was a rough time. We're going into a new game with new teams, new map. Everything's going to change from here. I just got to take it from the beginning again.
Thank you. That's good insight.
Okay, I think this question is concluded. Nodders in chat, if it is. If not, if there's a shakers.
Big nodders
Okay.
energy.
Oh, this is how
Okay.
you guys move on to next questions. This is amazing. I love this so much.
Fuck, I forgot
Just to
mine's
make
Christmas one.
Oh, there's a Christmas nodders. I need to steal that.
There's a jet nodders too. You're crazy.
It's cursed.
Okay. Thank you, Yeti. Good insight. Good insight. Okay. This is a question that we all, I think, even experienced observers. Oh, hey, Poggers. Okay.
Hello.
Do you want to introduce yourself real fast? I know it's kind of sporadic, but
Okay. Hi. I'm Sunny, but my username is Poggers. Nice to meet everyone.
nice meeting you too. I think this is the first time I have talked to you before, so that's dope. This is Yeti. Yeti, do you want to say hi?
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep on put unmuting, but hello. Nice to meet you too. Yes.
Cool, cool. Okay. So back to the questions. I think this is the one that always comes up the most is I guess as freelancers is how do you network and gain connections, especially when you're starting out or even if you have a little bit of experience under your belt and how to break out of this kind of amateur scene into maybe a higher tier, like, from amateur to tier 2 and tier 1 type thing.
Got you. Okay.
Mhm.
So this is going to be interesting, and this is probably going to be a question where I don't know if I'll have the best response or experience for. I know recently, I forget who it was. There was conversations about um, connections and networking going on Twitter by another observer. I think it was Zilv tweeted about it.
Yeah, it was Zilv. Yeah, I can find the
Yeah.
tweet actually. Hang on.
For me personally, I never really felt like I was ever trying to network. It was more or less just like I was working with people that I just got along well with and vibed with well. Um, I think every like quote connection I've made, I've either just made them as a connection because I've put in good work and they've realized that and have like wanted to hire me back because of the quality of work that I'm doing. Or it's just I'm more or less a friend in a way with people where they feel comfortable, asking me to do certain events or to hire me on for like other gigs. So I'm trying to think of like what advice I could give other than just be yourself and be honest with people. Because like that's sort of just how that's been able to work for me is I've just been just genuine with like who I am and what I want to do. And I think people okay and gravitated towards that as being fine.
Noti plus ratio. No, not ratio.
Ooh,
What is
damn, you're
ratio?
gonna ratio me like
I'm
this?
not
God
going to
damn.
ratio. I meant Noti plus
Banger. There we go.
retweet treat plus bacon. I'm sorry. I'm trying to
Oh, you
get.
just give him the ratio.
I'm not trying. I didn't mean to give him the ratio. Okay, I just kind of was spewing crap, and then both give me like a 5-minute debrief about all these like not boomer the zoomers
Oh, I was gonna say never ask Impulse on like meme turns or Twitter terms or anything because he's like a mile behind. But honestly, I wish I could give a better answer for this because I was thinking about it like when I saw them and I saw these questions, and this was like the one question I was like, shit, I don't really have like much for it because like in reality, I've never like met someone and talked with them and thought like, oh, I need to like watch what I say or I should like act super professional in front of these people because like they could give me like a big opportunity. It's always just been like my goal as an observer and like what I wanted to set up, what I wanted to do, and like how I wanted to do things was always like the first and foremost thing on my mind. And I was thinking about that as I was going through and like making connections and like building clients and stuff like that.
No, I think that that's the thing. Yeah, no, I 100% agree, especially the being chill part, okay, guys? I've had people who like have told me like, yeah, I really like working with you and hire you because you're chill and it's just great. Because let's be honest, like production work is very stressful, right? For the producer, for the observers, for the graphics operator, for the audio directors, and so being able to communicate well and having like a dope personality and be yourself does factor in whether or not you get hired, right? Also being good at the job, of course. Um, but yeah, and I think it's really important to also just get to know your peers too. I know I've vouched for multiple, like a lot of you guys, you know what I mean? Um, that can always happen. Like sometimes observers do have a say on who gets onto production teams. Mm. Sorry, Yeti. I just
Oh
hijacked
no.
your answer.
Oh no, you're good. I was also just reading the Ryan Central response to Zov's tweet and I did not realize that.
That's how I saw the tweet. Was Ryan's response I saw first, and I was like, that is odd. The third one didn't really hit. I didn't get it, but anyway,
Yeah.
general good
There's
advice.
something different with that third one. But actually I can comment on two things that Ryan Central put in that response actually. The and like this the first one's a really really big one because I think it's part of the reason why I got to do like the bigger riot gigs. The idea of if you're out of sight, you're out of mind, um, is like it's pretty big because for me, obviously like I think there's many reasons why I got selected to do what I was going to do. Um, the big three are like exposure, connections, and experience, or like skill, I guess. Um, but when I think about when I got my opportunity for Iceland, I got my opportunity because when the producers were looking for a free cam observer, they went to Prius or DJ to ask who could fill that role. Um, Obviously, like my skill and like my ability to do what I'm able to do helped me like confirm that spot and stay in that spot. Um, but part of the reason why I got that gig was because DJ saw what I was doing because of how much I was just like vocal about it on Twitter. Um, all through like start of Valorant, I was just like nonstop tweeting about like what I wanted to see in the spectator client, like what did I want to see improved on. I was constantly just like sharing clips of my observing. Like if I found there was anything like really nice that I did, like a nice free cam shot or just a sequence in POV where I captured like every single kill in a round, like in a short time span. Like I just tweeted that out because like I enjoyed it and like I genuinely just wanted to like show it off. But it sort of worked as like a way to self market what I was doing, to keep in people's minds that like I'm here and I'm doing this and like this is my work, right? And I think because of Twitter and because of social media, that's helped like play a huge part in that, as well as getting some other gigs as well. Um, so as much as it can sometimes suck to be on social media because there's a lot of bullshit that comes on, like i.e. literally everything Sembler tweeted today, but um, it's can be a good source for marketing and promoting your own work to people who could potentially be clients. And then the second part is sometimes you need to message a lot to remind people stuff. Um, a lot of people, even sometimes clients, will be constantly moving and like constantly working on multiple projects. Um, Sometimes it doesn't hurt to send people push notifications or like just like a little bump to get them to, um, I guess, like remember that you're interested or remember that you are involved in some way. If anyone has done work with Nerd Street, obviously it can be sometimes tough to get either an instant response or sometimes responses might be a little bit delayed, and like that's not at fault of them. They're just super busy. Um, it's just sometimes it's easier to send another ping and another like sort of reminder to someone to like follow up on a question or something that you might have to talk about them with in case they end up forgetting. And that ultimately the same way as like being in sight, being in mind, if you're still messaging them or talking with them or engaging with someone more often, the more they're going to remember you in general, right?
So I actually have a follow-up to that as well. So, and this may be hard to answer, but I'd be interested in hearing other people's take as well. But there is one person I have been DMing because like they constantly, or not constantly, a couple of times have tweeted that they are in need for like production. But every time I DM them, I get no response. So I don't want to be like annoying, but I'm trying to be persistent. So do you have any suggestions on how to kind of navigate that?
Um, let's see. I might need to think for a sec
Yeah, sure.
because I'm trying to like put myself in like the same situation. What I do. Um, I guess the way I'd think about it is if I like was in your shoes there, if I had never messaged that person to begin with, um, the end result would be that I wouldn't get to work the gig because I didn't end up asking or, reaching out to try to get involved, right? So that's like the worst case scenario is just like I don't make an effort to reach out and the answer ultimately is a no, right? Even if it's not them telling me a direct no, it's like since I'm not reaching out, I'm not giving myself an opportunity to get a yes. But if I reach out and there's that possibility that they respond and there's that possibility I get a yes, well then there's a gig that I can work on. There's some pay that I can earn, right? Um, I guess this goes to Ryan Central's second point, which is the worst thing that they can say is no, and essentially no response is also a no. Um, but if there is that potential, right, even if it's just through a single quick message or a single quick bump to try to get involved, if there is just some potential that you can actually acquire that gig by doing what is arguably like little effort to do, like to send a message is like a fairly there's like no real risk involved, right? You just sort of send the message, see if they're interested, and they either get back to you or don't. I think that that risk is worth the reward when like the risk involved is little to none, right? Like, or the worst case scenario is they say no or don't answer. Um, so it's just one of those things where it's like it doesn't hurt to just go for it, right?
Right, definitely. No, I think maybe a quarter or even a bit more of my gigs comes from cold DMs. So I definitely advocate for that. It's just this one in particular hasn't responded, but I'll be persistent because I really want it. Thanks.
It's definitely one of those things where it's if I know who you're talking about, like for me, cold DMing helps. And then especially for like for example, my first gig, really paid gig was BCTNA Game Changers series 1. And I know this might sound weird, but I think the timing of it was really nice. Like I was prepared. I knew my POV was good. Like I knew I was good at POV. That sounds really cocky, but I was like, I can do this, right? Um, and I knew like I might not be best at free cam, but I think I could learn it on the fly, and I could practice up to it. But I think it was the timing, and then I had someone vouching for me. V Flight is my observer mentor, and he vouched for me super hard t- to get into kind of box favor or whatever. So I think it's and I think the only reason V Flight was able to vouch for me is because he VOD reviewed with me like 10 times in a span of like 3 months. You know what I mean? So I think it's also, again, building those connections. And you can do that through like, again, other observers can get gigs, right? I've been passed down gigs by like V Flight, Sapphire, XYZ, and some of that is just like, if you need a VOD review, like I know a lot of, I'm open to VOD review. Mel from EU is open to VOD review. Yeti, I've been VOD reviewed with Yeti before. A lot of these experienced observers are willing to like do VOD review, and that's how you can build kind of that connection as well. I don't know if that makes sense, Mm. but
Oh yeah, that makes sense. 100%.
like for me, I personally do not vouch for people I do not VOD review with. Like if I do not know you're observing in and out, like I will not vouch for you. And that's just me defending my kind of, I don't want to say integrity, but if someone asks me for a recommendation,
Your own reputation sort of like
my
gets added to
reputation,
that.
yeah, exactly. So I cannot vouch for someone who I do not know their work, even if I like you as a person. You know what I mean? Even if I love you as a person, I just personally cannot. Um, I don't know. Yeti, do you have thoughts about that? Mhm.
I don't think I have like too much else to add. I think you like hit it right on, honestly.
So don't be afraid of asking people to vouch. Like I know some of you have asked me for VOD reviews, and I've VOD review with a lot of you guys before, but like I try to make time. Like I make time. Um, and if I forget, you literally just have to DM me, and I'll try to do it. Um, I just sometimes I'm busy, and then sometimes I'm just like my memory is like very messed up right now. Um, in terms of memory, you know what I mean? Like my memory is very bad. Um, because of COVID. Not gonna lie. Like I don't know what day it is. Um. So yeah. So I just think reach out to your fellow observers, especially the ones with experience. Um. I've reached out to even like Prius before about like rates and stuff.
Oh yeah, Prius is
Yes.
always like really open to talk about like rates and
Rates.
stuff. He's
Yeah.
like he's a really good open book to discuss things with. But it seems like a lot of people can be really hesitant to message someone, especially like him, because he's like really well known. He's got a lot of experience in the scene. But honestly, like if he sees like your DM, like he will respond if
He
it's like
was.
related to observing stuff.
I literally
No.
DM'd him like when I first started, and my message was on the lines of, "Yo, how do I get my name out there?" And he's like, and this was like October 30th, 2020. So I was a baby observer, and he still found time to answer me. It was on November 3rd, but like yeah, reach out to Prius, reach out to other people. Sapphire will answer too. She might just be very busy though. So
Not gonna lie,
you
that
know,
was me reaching out to you, Yeti. Like,
Yeah.
however long ago it was. Oh, I was like, this is terrifying. And I remember Benno being like, just do it. It'll be fine. And I was like, okay. And I did. And I don't know why it was like that, but I feel like it always will be. I mean, for some of us, I suppose. But yeah, probably one of the best things that I've done in a really, really long time. Gave me a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to sort of settle on. It was very, very, very useful.
I'll
and
actually just like add because like I sort of didn't think about this until now, but like I learned so much when I first started, even outside of observing, just like learning about production in general by just DMing people. So like I remember at one point, and I learned this a lot from my professor in my college. Um, or I'm pretty sure did most people here know Simo or remember Simo, the
Yeah, I know
caster?
Simon. He's
I
hilarious.
I
So
miss him.
he
Oh,
was actually my broadcast professor at my college. Um, and one of the things I saw him do a lot for our program was uh, he would just randomly DM like production people and casters to try to get them to come on for like guest lectures for some of our like classes. So we had people like Dash like call in for a guest lecture. We had people like John Deepa, who's a executive producer for the LEC, like come in and call and just like have conversations with us and like do a presentation. And he got all those to happen by just like DMing them and saying like, "Hey, can you do this?" or like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" Right. So I took from that early on in my career and did like the same thing. I just at one point I literally just Twitter searched like anyone who had LEC in their bio, so I could just ask them about production stuff. Um, I ended up messaging John Deepa and having a conversation with him. I messaged someone named like Thomas Blexa, which was a assistant director who used to be a like graphics operator for the LEC. I messaged the LEC observers when I was trying to learn more about how to observe League of Legends, and I actually learned a like boatload from Effie's, like one of the LEC observers, because she almost never like I think I was like the first person to ever like DM her to just ask about like league observing and like to ask for like recommendations or tips or like things to look at. So you'll be like really surprised how many people will actually respond to you if you just go to ask them questions, especially if it's something that they're also passionate about, because it's so easy for them to talk about it.
Amen. And also, like, we have mentors in POG servers, and all of them are willing to help you with whatever game. You just DM them. And I know a lot of them are busy, so like, we have Kai for League of Legends, and Moriai for Overwatch, and like me and Betty are willing to help you guys water review too. But yeah, I've reached out to a lot of observers. Um, and sometimes the best way to improve is to have a second look at your observing through a different lens, right? It wasn't until recently where I realized that with my POV observing, I could do a lot more with storytelling than I did, right? Um, there was a lot of gaps in space that could have been showing how, oh, if this person got this information, that means this rotate will come through, and I could show that rotation more clearly for the casters.
So I was gonna ask this later, but it actually blends quite well. Um, I know for me at least, observing is my first foray into anything broadcast related. And so you touched on this, but if you have anything more to add, I'd love to hear it about learning more about the broadcast side of things. Like, there's sometimes I'm in a broadcast that's like hybrid, and some of the language and terminology goes way over my head. So, do you have any suggestions about how to kind of lower that gap?
Um, I'd say it never hurts to ask about things. Um, the most recent example of me like going and like taking a step to like learn something new or learn something more was before I left for Champions, I did a day of Apex observing. I wasn't like actively observing, but I was sort of just like in the lobby, like using it as like time to practice and like learn a bit about it. And the person who was sort of like spearheading that and allowed me to like come in was someone named Bear OBS, if anyone's like familiar with him. Um, Pretty much like at any point during that stream, if I had a question, whether it was about the client, about settings, about why they communicate any certain way, I just like send them a message. And like he would get back to me whenever he could, or he would just like discuss things with me afterwards, and we would just like talk about it. Honestly, just asking a question if you have any kind of questions, like one of the easiest things. Um, like I do that all the time with a lot of like LAN event stuff because we work with like engineers who set up and do like a lot of our or like help us with our workflow for stuff. And I don't know a lot of the technical terms of like certain things that they use, or like I like know jack shit about engineering. But if I can ask them a little bit about it, so I have a better understanding of like how to, I guess like pronounce or talk about what I'm trying to get done or what I'm trying to achieve workflow wise, it'll just make their job easier in the end by me like asking and learning how they end up doing things, right? So asking is like the number one thing I'd say for sure is just don't be afraid to, you know, pick someone's brain about certain things, right? Because most people are really fine with sharing. And the next thing is just experimentation. So when I was learning stuff about like just broadcast production in general, before I did observing, I literally would just sit down, and this also goes back to VOD reviewing. Um, prior to Valorant, I did League of Legends and Rainbow Six, but the big one I wanted to do was League. So what I did was I like took a look at where I guess the bar was for the productions that I was doing at the moment, and then comparing it to like what the LEC was doing, because they were like a big focus point for me to like try to get up to. And I would see certain aspects that they have in their production. Like one of the first ones was like picture in picture. So it's like, oh shit, like it's cool they can have this little picture in picture box pop up and you see like the dragon spawn, in League, in that little corner. So it's like, how do I do that? I basically just went and experimented, like Google searched, YouTube search, like anything I could find related to picture in picture or like, doubling up observer feeds in a game. And one of the things I came across was just vMix in general as a program. And then I took the time to just sort of experiment, play around, and like learn vMix and everything I could do within that program to try to achieve the like quality or like the like new baseline of standard production that I wanted for my shows. And all that came from just me sitting on a computer, being like, oh, what does this feature do, or like, what does this setting do, and just like playing around with it. So experimentation can be like a huge way to just like learn things. It might not be the most efficient way to learn things, but as you continue to progress and like learn more about it, people will teach you like those little ways to like not necessarily cut corners, but to make things more like efficient. There were so many, like I thought I knew quite a bit about vmix when I first started, but until I met like Pinecone, one of the like producers and like TDs with Nerd Street, she taught me like so much more about like all these like little intricacies of the program to make things so much easier for myself. And I just like I got that through again asking questions or her just seeing what I was trying to achieve and realizing and telling me that there's a more efficient way of doing things.
I love it. Oh,
Yeah,
go
thank
Delta.
you. No, I was just gonna agree. Thank you. I also like the point about like following up with them later. Like, I always get really worried about um bringing things up when the production's going like 100 miles an hour or however you convert that to metric. But yeah, I think jotting it down and then like following up with whoever it was by DM it will really help. Thanks.
Yeah, when I did it with Bear, it was just sort of like I had a question, I just DM'd him. Like if it was mid like round or sorry mid game, like I know he wouldn't be able to respond, but he was like nice enough to just like respond like when he had his free time, right? Um, or if like he didn't have any free time and things were getting like really hectic. Since it wasn't a long show, he was fine with like staying with me after and like talking for like 30 minutes just to like figure out some more stuff or for me to like, refine my questions and stuff.
Got it. Thank you.
Overall, I just want to emphasize just asking questions is okay in general, right? If you don't know the production setup, if you don't know who your casters are, if you don't know what the teams are, just ask what you want to know, and usually a lot of people are very accommodating and they will appreciate that you're asking the questions now. Uh I think that's one thing that I'm pretty good at now is that I'm very vocal about what I am confused about. And I'm not trying to persuade other people. Like, for example, with tech stuff, I'm very bad with tech. Very bad. Um, so I'm not hesitant to like ask someone like, "Oh, what is parsec? Like, what do I need to do for parsec again?" Now that I know more about parsec, obviously, but when I first got introduced with parsec, I was like, "What?" You know what I mean? How do I set up XYZ? How do I add people? You know? So it's just doing that, and if it's before call time too, like during call time you can always like share your screen and like get things troubleshooted, um so forth.
And to add to that as well, I think most everyone who's involved in like esports broadcast production, they always want to like put on the best show they possibly can. So they would
Hmm.
always rather you have them ask a question to like clarify or like potentially fix a like certain issue than to like proceed with that issue or like with you being unsure, because like they want what's best. I know that you would want to put on your best performance as well. So it's like mutually beneficial for like everyone if you can like ask questions or learn more or like clarify certain things, right? And if anyone ever scolds you for not knowing, especially on a production that might be like remote or um, it's not like a champions level quality production, well, then that person is more or less just an asshole for trying to scold you like that. 99% of people would be fine with like answering or helping you out in those like given scenarios.
Amen. And it goes back to the whole like connections thing, where Yeti is like, yeah, if I put on my good work, I get more connections, right? So if it's just mutually beneficial, is that if you put on your good show, they most likely will hire you back. Um. So yeah. Okay. I think this question is number dos. Numero dos. Okay. Ronaldo's in the chat if we want to continue. On to the next question, number 3. Dope.
I posted in the wrong channel.
All good. Does anyone want to and like ask the third question? I ask it. So, what are the differences between observing on land versus in a remote setting? You have a lot of experience in both, which is dope. And similarly, before you said you worked on a production line. So, what exactly is it like to work on a production side? What's the flow, I guess, of it? Question mark. Yeah. Okay. I'm done.
Got you. So I would say fundamentally, there's not too much different because you're obviously like in both regards, whether you're remote or whether you're like in person in like an in-house setup or like at an actual LAN event, you're still observing within the spectator client, right? There might be slight differences to your setup that you might not be used to from a like at home setup, but those kind of differences are easily adjustable. So to give an example, when I do my in-game directing work, um, what I do for the like triggers to swap like different observers and to trigger like picture in picture on and stuff like that. I do that all through like foot pedals. Um, that the setup I have at home for my foot pedals is just a USB that's plugged in, or like a USB foot pedal based system that's like plugged into my second PC that runs a software that like macros those keys into something else. And then I like apply those macros in vMix to do what I want it to do. Right. Um, a similar aspect is achieved on LAN, where the engineers for at least like the masters events gave me foot pedals because like it's something I requested and something workflow wise I pitched to them to be able to do. So the idea of me using foot pedals to make those like switches or using my controller to free cam is all the same, but the process in which that works in the back end might be a little bit different. So instead of it going to vmix on another PC, it's being routed through a comms panel using something called like GPIs or GPIOs that are sending signals directly to the truck to trigger it on their vision mixer. So like the fundamentally I'm still doing the same thing while I'm observing. It's just like that workflow or format is going to be slightly adjusted. So the things that I might have to adjust to is just like, you know, a different kind of foot pedal since like my normal USB ones don't work. Or I might have a different way of, you know, setting up my monitors on LAN than I do in person because obviously my home setup is also like my playing setup and my casual setup. So I might want to like adjust my monitors differently or ask for another monitor or ask for a multi-view or a program feed in a certain area to really like change things up or make things a little bit more efficient for myself. But again, everything that it comes to in game, there's no real differences between observing, you know, remotely versus observing on LAN. There can be other creative things that you can do differently, that will like change up how you can observe. So, and this is like, this could also be true in a remote setting. Like there might be other things you don't expect that you would need to do as an observer, or you might be like required or asked to do, um, to like sort of help with the overall production. So, for example, me and, or at least for the last two events, me and the TDs always had some like fun way to transition us from out of game into game. Um, and like for Masters 3 Berlin, a lot of that was like individual, like fun, creative ways. So we did a like a transition of the spark from the stage, that's like on the giant LED floor, to like zoom out from that spark and cross dissolve that with a shot of me zooming out from the spark that's in game. And we had that sort of like matched in time. There was one where we did this pan across from Gambit or Nats's Panda Bear to the Tacta Bear that's in game, where it sort of dissolves together. So that's something that can happen that's a little bit different in land, is you sort of have these like creative ways of like working with other departments in the production to sort of like have a little bit of fun, in terms of like boosting production quality. Um, Another thing that you'll probably see a little bit more in LAN events, but this could also be remote as well, is certain things for like sponsorship deliverables. Um, so one thing, or I guess it's not really sponsorship deliverables, but just deliverables in general. One thing I did for Masters 3 a lot was, this was the first time that like Valorant implemented the like whole AR like map select, as well as like just like AR or augmented reality kind of features in general. And because the Zed skins had just come out and they did this whole thing with Zed, they wanted to show off the finisher effect in the stadium using the AR. Now, to pair that well, what they asked of me was to, whenever we had the opportunity to show off that animation in game, to try to free cam it so that we can have this smooth transition from in game Zed animation to out of game Zed AR. So that's a certain way I had to like tailor my observing just a little bit to notice something that I wouldn't usually need to be focused on. Right. So if I noticed that the final kill happened with the Zed play, I'd be as quick as I can trying to set up and get in place to try to show off, even a few seconds of that animation so that they can pair that well for in or for out of game. So those can be like little things that are like, obviously you won't fully ever be prepared for those kind of things. Like, obviously they're going to try to like tell you ahead of time, or they're going to try to plan that out. For all the like out of game to in game shots, we like rehearse them hours before the show to make sure we got them correct. But those will be like the small subtle differences between remote production and like online production. I guess now I think about it, some things could change depending on what you're used to for a remote workflow. So at least from like, uh, for what I do usually as this like in-game director, I usually have like I have my own PCs at home that I can use for my setup, and I usually don't parsec in. But there might be productions where you'll have to parsec in to like a local PC to observe off of. You'll probably have more differences in observing, in that regard, because obviously you don't have to remote into a PC. All your PCs will be like there locally ready for you to go and like do and change whatever you need to do. Um, but other than that, there's not too much that's different. Um, for the follow up to like what it's like to be like in a production line or in that production atmosphere, um, at least on a higher scale, like the masters events and stuff, it's almost surreal because you're coming into like a moving environment of like other departments all doing things at like the exact same time to try to like make these shows roll. Um, it is a little bit daunting at first because you're trying to find your position in there and you're not sure like, you know, like where your boundaries are, how far you can reach out to other departments or other people to like ask questions and do things. um I remember I was very nervous when I first went to Iceland to ask engineers for help on things because I didn't feel like trying to bug them. But it wasn't until after that event or probably through that event where I sort of realized that is sort of their job to be engineers and to help me out with issues engineering wise that I need to do to get my setup working. Um, so uh, the atmosphere around a like in-person production setup where there's a bunch of other people working around with you, it's really fun because there's like there's a lot of great people you can make and become friends with. Like there's a lot of people that are going to be brand new and coworkers and that you're going to work with, like a little bit more than you would in like a remote setting. So for example, like I talk with obviously in a remote setting, your team is a little bit smaller. Um, so you sort of like pretty much know everyone, but you don't necessarily always work like directly with someone. Like you talk with your TD, you discuss stuff with your TD, you communicate with your TD, but you don't necessarily like get in, your TD setup. You're not really like going in and remoting into your TD's vmix save and like, discussing things with them, right? But in like a LAN setting, like there have been plenty of times where I've needed to like walk over to the truck and talk with our replay operators and EVS operators and like sit down and discuss like, problems that we needed to solve. Like problem solving becomes a big thing like for LAN events because there's so many different little things happening at once. A lot of things can break like really, really easily. Um, so one big thing that's like very, very different is just like how often you end up really congregating and like problem solving with a bunch of other departments. Which sounds like at first it would be rough to think about or do, because you might not like know exactly what the solution to certain problems will be. But when you bring a lot of people and a lot of minds together to do these kind of like problem solvings, like situations, it actually becomes a lot of fun. Also, I realized I went on a really long tangent and said a lot of stuff with that. So sorry if I lost you at any point.
Yeti, we just appreciate you being. You can literally talk about anything. I'll be like, yeah, that's words from a god, and I'll just sit back and just enjoy. No, I feel that. I mean, I didn't. I've worked on 2 lands, and they're definitely different than like a riot land, I guess. But like the one thing I learned a lot is from my land, just being adaptable to like just kind of a lot of things can go wrong, and then when they do go wrong, it gets really chaotic. So it's really important to just keep up the mental and just like
Oh yeah. Oh, be ready for anything. Like you
yeah, be
said,
ready for
being
anything.
like adaptable is like really huge. Especially for champions because there was something that happened during champions that I don't think most people realized happened, and I think the response to what happened was actually like just really incredible. The fact that most people didn't realize what was going on. Um, this is already public, or DJ made it public, so I don't mind saying it. But we get like COVID tests like every single day. Like we get antigens every single day and PCRs like every like Tuesday, Friday, or like every like 2-3 days. Um, but one of the days DJ actually tested positive for a PCR test, which ended up being a false positive PCR. Because of that, obviously, him as well as any close contact that was near him with a mask off for more than 15 minutes, which is the rest of the observers as we eat and stuff like that, had to also do a short 5-day quarantine as a close contact. Now, everyone was fine. Everyone was healthy because it was a false positive. But because of that, observers had to go remote. So and this happened the morning of a show day. So within 5 hours, our engineers had to figure a way to get observers to a hotel that's 40 minutes away where the players are at. So give us our own isolated setups that all work in tandem and send feeds to the truck that's 40 minutes away in a different studio, and still allow me to be able to do my in-game directing and switch using foot pedals at that remote location, that trigger in the truck. So all this had to be done within a really quick time span, like all out of nowhere. So for us as observers, like having to just adjust to going to a brand new setup, one also dealing with the potential oh shit, do we have COVID because we were nearby this person? Having to be like transported locations to do that, and then having to get comfortable actually observing in that new setup, which like it was fine because we basically hit everything like one to one that we needed. The engineers did like a fucking fantastic job. So much so that you probably wouldn't even notice halfway through Champions that observers went remote. Um, but like still having to like be ready to adjust within such a short time frame and like do all these kind of like last minute changes is something that could like happen fairly often. Like maybe not to that same scale because obviously like COVID brings its own complications, but um, there could be an issue where, partway through all of, your PCs just decide to disconnect from the internet and now you need to start working with engineering to find out why, all these PCs just disconnected out of nowhere, right? So being adaptable, being ready to, adjust to any kind of situation is definitely like will really help you during any of these like major issues because Murphy's Law like really applies in live production in general. So like anything that can go wrong at some point will go wrong. And sometimes all things will go wrong at one point. So you just sort of need to be able to adapt and adjust to that. Yeah, if that ends up being the case.
Amen. Same thing goes with remote broadcasts, man. There's been many times in remote broadcasts where it's like stuff just gets changed on the fly,
And
for observer setup. Am I using parsec? No, I'm using sending feed. Oh, okay, type of
yeah,
thing. Or am I doing point of view? I literally had the day like the day before where I was doing observing, like in my the gig. I was like, oh, I'm doing observing, and then the person's like, nah, I'm gonna put you on a different wall. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But it's kind of those type of things where you just gotta roll with the punches and make best with what you can do and provide solutions if you're able to, um, and so forth.
I think the most important thing I ever learned at LAN was take a spare cable for your controller every time. It doesn't matter if you have one. You have to take a spare.
I'm at the point where I've even taken spare controllers in general because
Yeah.
during LCQ, I only brought one of my controllers on accident, and my left trigger broke partway through. So I was like, shit, I need to go get a new controller. So the next day,
Yeah.
I went to my local Best Buy and picked up two. That way, if that one I bought broke, I had another backup.
Yeah. When I went to when I did Game Changer Series 3 in Berlin, I took my controller with me, but I took what I thought was the right cable, but it wasn't. It was a much shorter one that was like half the length. So I ended up having to swap my keyboard cable because I was really lucky that my keyboard also uses USB-C.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I used my keyboard cable for my controller and I swapped it with my other one so I had the distance back because it just didn't reach around from the PC that they set me up on, and I was like, "Oh god." And then I realized that I could swap them out. I was so lucky though. I was so lucky because it was almost an absolute fucking tragedy, so
That's a smart solution, though.
yeah, I'm just really, really lucky that my keyboard uses USB-C. Like, really glad that people have started coming around to generalizing cables.
Ducky gang.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely bring your own peripherals though. Like if you have a computer, like keyboard and controller that you really love, do it. Like
Do
I've
it,
gone
yeah.
to
Oh,
the
yeah.
point where I'm going to start bringing my own headset because the headsets I use are kind of, you know what I mean. So if you have like something that you really love, like bring it with you.
Do what I did. Just get a matching set because you're really
Yeah.
lame.
I actually like had two instances where bringing my own stuff really, really helped. I did a very small LAN event in Toronto, like back in like mid 2020, where like the location I was at didn't have a lot of like, it was like a LAN center, but there was obviously like a lot of things I didn't like have ready to go or would have needed to go out and get for us, where just bringing it myself made things a whole lot easier. Um, Actually, with that remote issue that we had because of like the COVID scare in Champions, um, the only reason I was able to get my foot pedal set up working for that event was because I brought my USB foot pedals with me just for the odd chance that I would need it. I packed them like without really thinking, just sort of been like, just in case. Um, if I need to use this for some sort of reason, at least I have it. Even if the actual or the actual thing that happens with it is it just sort of sits in my suitcase for the entire time that I'm there. But because of that issue that we had, um, I actually was able to use that as my option to be able to like do my switching because I could plug that into the local PCs that we had and like trigger that macro with the program that we were using for me to be able to do those kind of switching. So probably would have been a nightmare if I didn't end up bringing that at all. So I'm glad I decided to just in case. Also as like a comfortability thing too, especially if you have like a keyboard. Obviously not all keyboards are the same, and you might have preference for like your keyboard based on like the keys or like the separation between keys. um I have my own set of like keyboard, mouse pad that I like have devoted just for like LAN use, so it's like always just stored away for travel, that I bring over, that's very similar to what I use at home, so that when I go on these LAN events, I don't have to fully like take apart my setup, but I can also bring, something that I'm familiar and comfortable with, so I'm not like, misclicking on keys or anything.
Facts. Okay.
Yeah, I like the
I
fact
think
that my keyboard's a bit smaller too, because it's usually fits into setups or something. I don't know. I just always feel more comfortable on it.
Oh, you
Generally.
got a matching keyboard and controller. Oh, that's pog.
I went the whole way and I paid too much for that controller, and it was worth. It was so worth.
I'm not gonna lie. Sorry, this is a side note. Xbox or like Microsoft like put out this like one like tweet or did this like promotional thing, like a collaboration with Gucci, and they had a Gucci Xbox controller. And no lie, I was sitting there like, that would be fucking hilarious to have
Ready to
as
drop
like,
it.
yeah, just to like roll up to a LAN and be like, yeah, I got my Gucci controller with me, like let's go.
That'd be so good.
But they didn't sell them individually, so you had to buy it with the Xbox, and the Xbox was like what, $5,000. So I was like,
Oh
nah, never
god.
mind, not fucking
Never
worth
mind.
it. But I was like, that would be the funniest just meme of all time, just to have a Gucci Xbox controller.
That'd be so sick. Resell the Xbox, yeah.
Oh, true. Actually, you're right. Because it came with two controllers. I just keep one, sell one with
Oh,
the
do you get what
controller.
I mean? Keep it for like 10 years and then sell it then. So it's like a collector's item. People will
God,
lose their
that'd be
shit.
such an investment. Holy. But yeah, sorry. That was a little side note.
it's all good. Okay. Nada's in chat. If our answered has been our question has been answered. Gosh. Dope. Okay. Delta, ask question number 4. Because that is your question. Homie.
Yeah, sure. So, what advice do you have for people trying to build their in-game directing skills? I can't really imagine personally ways to practice that or kind of to build that skill without actually doing it. So, do you have any suggestions for like how to get in that mindset or how to just first engage with it?
Yeah, so I guess like obviously like you said, one of the easiest ways to like practice or get better at it is to like do it. But I know like the opportunity sometimes isn't always there to be able to like take that control for a broadcast, or like it's not that consistent to be able to like get practice in Valorant sometimes, because you need like an actual live uh game going on to be able to do so. Or at least until if we somehow get a demo system at some point, that'll make that a lot easier. But for right now, it's like really tough. um, I think the biggest thing for me when I was like sort of starting doing in-game directing for Valorant, and like thinking about the decisions that I wanted to make as an in-game director, a lot of it came from VOD reviewing like my previous work doing so, and understanding, did this switch I make here work? Was I too late on switching in a certain area? Does this pip that I decided to throw up actually adding value to the experience or removing value? I sort of just like got really critical with myself and a lot of the things that I was doing to try to see and just ask myself the question constantly, like, is this beneficial to the viewer experience? Is the viewer understanding what I'm trying to show, or am I giving them the right information? So honestly, you can do a deeper VOD review of like your own work, but you can also, if you want, just watch back your work casually, even if it's like with like just friends in Discord or something. Because the best thing you can do as an in-game director is put yourself into the shoes of a viewer, and a viewer isn't necessarily going to be like, you know, looking at every little detail like of your observing, or like checking to see how long your free cam was up, if it was like a second too long or a second too short, right? But if you sort of watch it mindlessly the same way a viewer would be watching it, you can sort of get an idea or a sense of like what they're seeing in that moment. And if something makes sense for you and you sort of just skip over it and like almost don't realize that you even did that free cam shot, or you like made that switch, then like it's fine because it felt natural. It felt like it flowed. But if there was something you were like, you instantly knew just casually watching, you were like, oh shit, that confused me, or like, I don't know why I did that, or I looked over at this area and that distracted me from another thing. You'll sort of like come to find those certain aspects where, you know, you realize like what works and what doesn't. Um, Alongside VOD reviewing your own work, if this is a lot harder with like open tournaments, because you see like a lot of teams coming in and out, and like you don't really get to see like consistency of teams to be able to like really accurately predict and understand what they're going to do. But if you do get the chance, either in like a closed league or teams that are constantly recurring or coming back to certain tournaments that you're doing, VOD reviewing those teams can like be super beneficial for you. So every single Masters event so far, since I knew which 12 to 8, like 18 teams or however many there were coming for each single event, um, I was able to like actually like break down in depth and see like what these teams do, what these individual players' tendencies are, so that it made my job a lot easier to to predict in the moment when I was observing them. So, for example, I'm trying to think, who is that high flying Rays from Masters 3? I'm blanking out on his name. It was one of the, I think,
Bunny?
yeah, Bunny. Oh, when I VOD reviewed Bunny for the first time and I started seeing what he was doing, it was like, oh, okay, I know this guy's play style. I know whenever he's posted up on some like high ground that like he's gonna do some like quick blast pack play in. So I could adjust my free cam observing, but also my in-game director timing for those switches, knowing what his pathing was gonna be and like how he was gonna maneuver himself around. Um, so one thing I mention a lot about is like understanding the like pacing and timing of Valorant, especially with certain teams, like knowing which teams play in a certain play style will help you understand how you can present that information to a viewer, right? So for example, Fnatic is very much a like set up, strategize, and like execute kind of team. So you'll always see them at the beginning of certain rounds where like if they're going to take an A hit or something, they're going to have like the KO setting up a lineup for, you know, this spot on Heaven. The Killjoy is going to have a Molly that's going to land backside here. The Astra's going to smoke place A, B, C, and then pull this area or whatever. Like they're going to have that consistency, and like they're always going to do that same thing. So I can adjust my observing to be like, okay, let's show the site, let's show the strategy, let's show how everything is taking off for their execution. And then the second they start to push in the site, like the second that actions are getting ready to happen, and I've shown off like all of that precursor stuff or all that stuff to help set the scene prior, I can cut and let my POV take that from there. And like the only reason I'm really able to do that accurately is because I know what they're going to do prior, and I know like how fast they're going to react to certain situations. Um, so understanding the teams that you're watching, how they play, how that will affect the pacing of the game, will allow you to make decisions as an in-game director to switch more accurately. One thing I will say is never get discouraged by a mistimed switch. It happens all the time. I even did it, I think, 3 times yesterday. There were so many moments where you think you're probably going to think things are fine. You're staring at your mini map. You're like, okay, cool. no one has any line of sight of each other, no one's going to peek anything. I can do this free cam right here to provide more context to like defensive positioning or something. And the second you go to do it, some dude dry peeks a corner and gets one tapped. And you're like, well, fuck. Like
I feel like
there's
you are
not
like
much I can do there. Right?
rent free in my head right
Yeah.
now. Like
So that happens really often. There's not much you can do about it. That's just something like it sucks. You'll see if you can try to pay attention a little bit more for the next time if like there was something that could have been readable from it. And then you just GG go next kind of thing with it, right? But yeah, to wrap this whole thing up, if you can, understanding the teams that you're watching, reviewing or reviewing the teams that you're watching, even like just single tendencies of players. So knowing X player loves to do default shock darts as Sova will allow you to pre-set up certain, positions to be able to like watch that like counterplay come out. VOD reviewing your own work as well will just make you understand what you're doing and whether or not what you're doing is actually making sense and understandable. So overall, reviewing or VOD reviewing can be a like huge portion of like making sense of what you're doing as an in-game director.
Definitely. And when it comes to the open tournaments, at least for me, like there's just like some fundamental things that you can just always count on, I guess, when it comes to player positioning, and that's just based off of minimap and just how I personally do my POV. Like, it's hard to really explain, but like when it comes to open tournaments, obviously you can't always VOD review every team. It's just not possible. So if you just know like, hey, yeah, Stover's positioning for shock dots on A ascent is always going to be in like the very back, like left corner. You know, I know where that is. You know what I mean? And just knowing these player positionings and being really attentive of where they're at is going to not only improve your free cam, to improve your TDing or in the game directing, it also improve your POV, right? And a lot of times it's like with my technical directing, if I'm afraid to cut, I tend to like before I cut, I tend to look at what my POV is observing too. Because sometimes it's very jarring.
Oh, yeah, making sure you're like on the same page is good. If
Yeah.
like if it's possible when you're in game directing to have like a feed of what your main observer is doing near you that's like undelayed from like a return feed or anything, just so you can use it as reference, can be like really helpful because um as much as like you and like another observer could probably be on the same page about what you want to show, there might be some instances where you guys are both noticing different things.
Yeah.
There's definitely been times where it was like, um, actually, I have I wonder if I could find the clip of this um, from the last Masters where I made a switch noticing something that DJ just didn't recognize was happening. And it came sort of from a difference of me knowing and understanding more about ability usage in Valorant and him being more in tune with gunplay of CSGO, where he was like really held deep on an op and like watching this angle, this op play that could potentially happen. But as that's happening, there was a lot of utility and like information being played out for that round where like a Sova drone had cleared someone and the team decided to like throw a Viper Molly, a Sage Slow, and a Brimstone Molly all at this one player sitting in a corner. So the cut from the POV of the op holding this angle to me and Freecam showing this player just getting utility dumped on him like midway through it happening looked a bit odd because it felt like we missed a certain portion of the story or that setup for it. But that's just because we were on different pages and I didn't communicate it well enough with him like for that moment, right? So making sure you're on the same page or the same wavelength about like what's being shown. And as an in-game director, since you're the one who has that control, you're usually the one that can not necessarily like direct it to him because obviously you don't always want to like tell your main observer what to do at all times, but you can provide that extra info for him because you might or him or her, sorry, because you might have a different perspective on what's happening overall than they do have in the POV, right?
Yeah, definitely. I personally think, at least from my point of view of a secondary, like my goal is to relieve as much pressure from the POV observer. So that means also like, and also supplementing the POV's main story, whatever they want to do. Uh, so I think it's always important to just look at the program feed, because if you guys are in sync, it makes a clear viewer experience. You know what I mean? So definitely with Yeti there. It's really good to communicate. Sure, everyone's on the same page, and just support your POV as much as possible, in my opinion. Uh, does this answer the question? Nodders in chat. Or do we want more in depth?
Oh, actually, I'll say one thing I will add just as a response to that message in the chat. If you're a POV observer and you see, especially during pre-round, if you see someone getting ready to do a lineup, that helps your free cam observer so much. Because pre-round, your free cam observer is usually like devoted to or like working on a cinematic, so they can't really like look at like things that are happening or being prepared. Because Valorant in the first like 15-25 seconds, a lot of information utility gets thrown out. So if you're a POV observer and you're like, oh, Viper is doing this like smoke lineup or Sova's got this arrow lineup, that like really helps your free cam like a lot.
It is my lifeblood, and I appreciate it every single time.
Also, I don't know if I also answered number 5 at the same time as 4 with that question.
Yeah, you already did that. Dope. Which is dope. I just said dope in the last like 10 seconds. Great. My vocabulary is freaking awful. So let's go on to question 6. So you mentioned that you had prior POV experience. Does that has that experience helped you develop your free cam and know those timings a bit better?
I wouldn't say necessarily the aspects of POV observing has helped me improve like free cam and cinematic stuff, but the knowledge I gained from doing POV and understanding what is in the mind of a POV observer has helped me like as an in-game director and as a free cam observer like understand like what they might be focused on at given moments. Um, it sort of goes it almost like creates like a natural synergy when you can sort of get in the mind of the people that you're working with. There's tons of moments where because I've worked with Preston for so long that I sort of understand what he does as a POV observer, and what I know from my experience also POV observing, like and starting with him, because like when we started Valorant, obviously everything was brand new. We were both just finding it out at the same time. It made it really easy for me to sort of just like understand what he was going to do or what he's planning to do. Um, there's so many instances where we'll just both be like in the pre-round and we'll both on our mini map start to see like a Viper walk up close to a barrier and we're like, she has ult. And we both at the exact same time say Viper's probably gonna ult A main here or something like that. And we'll legit say it at the same time. It's just like that idea of like reading a mini map in POV will also help you read the mini map in free cam and understand like what's going to happen and like help keep you on that same page as your POV observer. So like I'd say there's nothing that I did POV observing where I was like, oh, like this, I could do this in free cam if I were in free cam. But it was more or less just like the mindset of being in a POV observer, or I guess in-game directing, helped a lot knowing what the mindset of a POV observer is.
100%. Yeah. I personally, for me, the hardest part about free camming is the creativity. And then, like, there's just some things like that. For me, it was just like, how can I show this better as a cinematic observer? Like, some of my shots were kind of just like something looked just wrong about my shots. Um, so
I
for
will
me, that was
say,
the hardest. That was the hardest part. Is that I was like, can I show this off better? Um, but I felt like because I had a solid foundation of POV, I was able to find these natural timings easier. And for me, the second hardest part is just knowing how fast like my POV likes to switch to different players, if that makes sense, and
yeah,
trying to alleviate that a bit, like make that transition from free cam to POV a bit smoother. Just knowing how, oh yeah, they instead of like they like holding on to a player a little bit longer, or maybe they like switching really fast. Has really helped me, I guess.
I guess another thing I just sort of realized is also knowing when you can help relieve stress of your POV observer.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because like there might be like moments where it's a 5v5 retake, and like obviously not everything is going to be captured. Or if you do capture everything in a 5v5 retake, goddamn, that's amazing. Um, but knowing like something like an instance like that might be happening, and your replay observer or replay operator can take your secondary feed as free cam for replay in those scenarios, means you can like tailor your observing for like that replay to like clear up a situation that might be happening. Or another example is like if teams are defaulting and like no one's really peeking anything and things are just really really slow, and there's not much going on, like knowing you can sort of free cam in between those moments of dead air where your POV observer is just going to be standing on, a person staring at a wall for the most part. Um, One just helps the production feel a little bit more like seamless, but two makes it so that they're not sort of just stuck like on the same point of views of the same people during these like 40 seconds of downtime. So like basically every single time Gambit plays, because they like to wait till the last 20 seconds to execute.
Amen. I think it's so important to relieve the stress of the POV. Like, there's been many times where my secondary, like, Ty's my duo, and I'm like, look, Ty, like, there's like two Viper pits and like an Astro wall. Like, I need you to do
And a
like an
Viper
over
wall through there as well.
and like smokes. I'm like, I need
Yeah.
you to do an overhead. Like, I know you want to do some fancy stuff with like the throwing and stuff, but like, if I get like, I'm gonna try my best to get as many kills as I can. But sometimes it's very chaotic, and as a POV, you get stuck as like I think POVs are tend to be a lot. We get really depressed when we miss like kills, even though it's like so easy to miss this kill just because of just one someone a player just whiffs. That's not your fault. That's like the player just disappointing you. That's what VFly says to me. Two, again, there's a lot of utility on site, like two Viper walls, an Astra wall, and like a raise ult, type of thing.
Yeah.
So for me, I as a POV definitely state your needs too. Like for me, for Ty, like if I say, "Hey Ty, I know this person. I caught two of these kills, and I know that they could get a third one. Can you just keep an eye on this third person for that third kill? Because for me, I might be focusing on something different. Maybe this third person is lurking still, and there's a side pushing up, right? A side push. And for me, at least for me, right? I'd rather prioritize the side push over the lurk, because that's the main storyline, in my eyes, is that we need to get plant down. So definitely communicate with your duo if you need anything POV. That's just my opinion. That's just at least from POV. So
Well, any kind of communication will always help, right?
yeah.
Especially, and like the one thing just to like add on to that too. Personally, this is just like my take. I think some people could disagree with me. I always think that practicality should always overtake creativity in certain aspects when it comes to observing. Um, Mainly, like this is when talking about like free cam stuff. There's plenty of times I could do like a nice creative shot of like a player in a third, and like or like one of the thirds of your screen, pan over to this like nice other shot. Um, but sometimes when there's like a moment like that where like things are getting really, really hectic, um, it can be easier to just, go with the wide and think about, what's going to make the most for a viewer to be able to understand the situation that's unfolding, right? Um, so like I personally like will usually overtake my practical shots, or I'll use my practical shots over a lot of my creative ones, just given the circumstances that we have. There will be instances where you can find both. Um, I actually almost forgot to like find this clip until now. I was sort of reminded of it. There was a shot um, from Champions where it was like a 1v1. I think Gambit, I think it was Gambit versus Crew, was going to defuse in the very last round. But one of the players was sitting right behind a smoke where the bomb was being defused. And I did this transition shot from out of the smoke where one player was sitting to in the smoke where the player was defusing, where it was meant to be a creative shot, but actually showed a practical use of positioning for players. But even though my intention wasn't to make it like fully a creative shot, like I wanted to look cool, but I also just wanted to show how close the players were to each other. Um, the idea of like practicality was the first thing in my mind over like how can I make this creative.
I love that. I do the same with Astro Walls. If they're right next to each other, I
Oh
like
yeah, because
go
those can
on
be a
one
pain
person
to figure
and then
out,
yeah.
like in
Sometimes it's a timing
POV.
thing. That's a timing thing too. Okay. Does that answer? I guess I answered this question. So our last final pre-made question will be asked by Betty.
Yeah. How did you transition into like full-time esports freelancing? And before that, how did you balance freelancing with like school and or other jobs?
Okay, so this is a good and interesting question because I think my sort of route into esports was very, very different than most other people's like startings with esports. Um, I actually, like I said earlier, SEMO was one of my professors at my college. That's because the college that I went to, I was studying a program for esports entrepreneurship and administration. So it was a little bit easier for me to balance like school with like my freelancing work because of the fact that I was sort of doing both in one. At first, like a lot of my work that I was doing, even if it was like very low paid or freelance, was all like collegiate work for my college or for like very local sort of like uh, events and stuff. So there were certain instances where I was doing broadcasts, but also getting graded on those broadcasts and sort of experimenting as I do it. Um, and that also helped with like just like the equipment that I was using because I was in that program. We had like assets available for me to use like for my freelance work, and they were fine for me or like allowing me to use like location and like PCs and equipment and all this to do that kind of stuff. Um, Another reason why this sort of gets odd is because a lot more of my program that I started doing along the same time where I started doing a lot of freelance work was during the remote period of COVID. So when COVID hit, all of my studies went online and my courses were asynchronous. So I didn't have set scheduled class times. It was always work on and like read or watch the lectures when I had time that day. So it made it really easy for me to balance being able to like, set and like grab a gig that was from like 4 p.m. to like 12 midnight, where I could just tell myself, okay, that morning I will watch my lecture from 8 to 12 and then do any kind of work and relax from 12 to 4. I sort of had that room to adjust certain things or like mess with my schedule a little bit. Um, Funny enough, at the time of me like actually like trying to head in esports, I didn't have another job because the job I worked prior was a seasonal job. So I would do it during like the spring, summer, but then I wouldn't work during like the fall, winter, um, because I worked at a garden center. So like obviously like flowers aren't like a year round thing to really do. So I didn't work too often. Um, so I'm trying to think of the best way to like give advice or help in this area, but I've sort of just been really lucky where I haven't needed to stress too much about balance for stuff. Um, or at least just for like the balancing portion of this question, it was a little bit easier for me because I had a lot of freedom to adjust my schedule. Um, I definitely will say there are certain things that when I needed to, or when I had confliction between things, I would need to schedule around it and prioritize certain aspects of what I wanted to do. So when I went to Iceland for the second master's, I still had classes and stuff that I was doing around that time. Um, where I basically just I don't know if this is the best option. Obviously, because I was in an esports program, my professors understood this. They understood that I said I was going to work a gig with Riot and I was not going to be at any actual scheduled class times, or I might be, you know, responding to things a little bit late. And they were fine with that, just knowing what I was doing. But obviously, trying to find that sort of prioritization if you're having a confliction. I'm not saying don't, you know, work on your studies or don't put focus on your studies, but sometimes the opportunity that is in front of you might be something that will bring much more in the long term for you to have to overlook something else in the short term. So for me, missing a few, classes that like I had to jump into a Zoom call for, usually to travel to another country for work, seemed worth it to me. Um, in like for that, like to like weigh them out, it seemed much more worth to go. Obviously, do a larger production. Um, but yeah, so I'm sorry I don't have too much in terms of like the balancing of like work and freelance work and school and freelance work, because I've just sort of really been lucky with the route that I've had there. But in terms of transitioning into full time freelance, I actually sort of just I never really had a moment where I sort of realized that I was like transitioning full time. Um, just because I never really had like a really consistent job prior. It was sort of just I started by doing volunteer work and like very low paying gigs. And then when Valorant came out, because I just like dove deep and like focused really hard in trying to like improve and really develop myself in the scene. Um, Over time, those opportunities just started like, uh, bringing themselves to me, and I sort of just started getting enough work where I could consider myself, at least for this year, full time in it. Um, Not to say that like I'm fully full time and I'll always be full time because it's still freelance work, right? Like things can come and go easily. Like clients could take you or drop you the next day, or small companies that are clients can come and go, super fast, super quickly, right? Because a lot are generally startups. But I've just been lucky enough that I've had enough gigs that I could just say that this year I pretty much worked full time because I didn't have any other job conflicting, and I made enough money to really sustain myself for this year. But yeah, there wasn't too much of a build up for it. It was sort of just like I just wanted to work Valorant and I just wanted to do gigs, and I because of the work that I did do, I got a lot of opportunities, at least enough to then consider myself working full time in esports for this year. I would say because you never know how the years after will proceed and stuff. Yeah, I hope that answers the question because my situation was a little bit different or a little bit far off from what most people's would usually be.
No, it was good. It's nice to hear about like different people coming and doing esports. So, thank you.
All right, that's all the pre-made questions. Okay, we can accept Yeti. Been like an hour and 40 minutes, so maybe we can do if you have like if anyone wants to add like 2 more questions, maybe one or two questions more. If y'all have a question,
I have a
go
really
ahead.
oddly specific one, if that's okay.
Lay it
Yep.
on me.
Did you use any specific guides, or did you completely figure out yourself how, in terms of setting up a stream deck for TD stuff?
I'm trying to think. I think when it came to setting stuff up, like with vMix specifically, I had to look up some guides because like I knew a bit about the program and like I knew some things with it, but there were certain like things I was trying to achieve that I didn't know I would be able to do without, looking up a more in-depth guide on how to do it.
Yeah,
When it came to stuff with the Stream Deck, I think that was like just simple enough for me to like play around with, and I eventually got it.
yeah,
But yeah, I'd say it's probably just a mix of like again experimentation and then just trying to browse for resources online. Um, when it comes to vMix stuff specifically, it's really cool that vMix does their own tutorials for their program. Um, like the actual developers do all the tutorials for stuff, so you can learn a lot about the program just because the people who made it are teaching you how to use it,
yeah.
which is really great for trying to understand certain things around it.
Yeah, I haven't committed to vMix yet, but hopefully at the start of next year I might.
It's
Because
a
I know
bit
they do a
expensive.
subscription service now, so that's
Yeah,
what makes it a bit easier.
that's the thing. I sort of wish they had that subscription service like 2 years ago when I bought it because I dropped
Yeah,
like $1,000 on it. So, but which
yeah,
it's made its money back for sure, and definitely worth grabbing, especially in remote because it's like it's the premier like remote like software to use.
yeah,
You can do a lot of the same things that you can do in vMix in OBS with like external like plugins and stuff, but if you want that ease of accessibility and that more, I guess, like industry standard use of a software, like vMix is always really great to like have some experience in.
Most high-paying gigs require vMix, for the most part, from what I can tell. Um,
I know some TOs might have the ability to like give you a key to use part time for certain events, but it's always good to have yourself too, just so you're aware of like how to move around it, and then you can also use it for like anything else you might want to do.
yeah. Because I was like, when I did VCTSEA, it was really weird and scuffed. Like, we didn't use vMix; it was like a weird mix of RSec and a bunch of other things. So
VSTSC
an
was a
experience.
time. Was a time.
Sure was something.
Mhm.
As I say,
Okay.
that's where that adaptability will come into play.
Mhm.
Is when you come
Yeah.
into a workflow that is either not what you're used to or even sometimes less efficient than what you're used to, and you sort of just have to go with the flow.
I feel like every producer is different too.
Yeah, oh yeah, everyone has like a different idea of how they
But
usually like to do things.
Yeah.
And actually, I will say, just to add on to that, never be afraid to suggest certain things to like other producers and TDs and stuff. I think one of the reasons I've made such an impact with what I do observing wise was because the 2 times I wanted to bring a setup that I knew was efficient and I knew I was comfortable within, I sort of just asked to do it or asked to incorporate it. When I first started working with Nerd Street, like one of the first things I like messaged Bach about was like, I was like, hey, I this was for the For the Women Ignition Series event that happened. Like, when did that happen? It was a while ago.
it was last
Um,
year in June or something in August. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
basically
remember that.
told him, I was like, hey, I have this workflow I usually have for like my in-game directing stuff. I usually like take the control like away from the TD and do like these switches myself. And I like literally explained the whole workflow and format to him and the reasons why I felt it was more efficient and the reason why I thought it worked. and I basically pitched it to him, like in a like mini presentation to be like, "Hey, I want to do this," and he was fine with that and okay with that, and it worked really really well. And then I did the same thing when I went to Iceland. I literally had, I remember having in a general observer meeting with like directors and like TDs and producers and stuff like that, and being like, or having them ask us like, you know, what do you guys want to do with your setup? What do you guys need? And I remember just pitching the whole setup again to them, and them being so ready for it and so down for it that they send me up with another meeting with the engineers the day after to try to get it all organized. So, um, obviously, there might be some tournament organizers, some TDs that won't be as um, keen on doing something that you might suggest. I've definitely pitched my normal setup to, um, you know, a TD who liked to do things their way, and I didn't have the opportunity to do things in the way that I was used to. But it doesn't hurt to ask or doesn't hurt to suggest, right? Especially if you can give like really good reasoning as to why the thing you're trying to add or the thing you want to do could be super beneficial for the production as a whole. But like the main thing is just never be afraid to speak up or ask about those kind of things, especially if it's going to make your job and other people's jobs easier.
Mhm.
Okay. Question answered, I think. Do we have any more questions?
I just say if anything doesn't pop up now, and anyone like has a question that pops up like later in the night or some other day, like easily just DM me on Twitter or Discord, ask me at any point. Like I'll usually get to you as soon as like I have available time, or like 90% of the time I'll answer like right away.
Amen. Same goes to me, except sometimes I just forget. So if I don't answer within like a day, just ping me again. Um, but yeah, thank you, Yeti. Can everyone say thank you? I feel like a kindergarten teacher when I do this. Can everyone just introduce yourself? Okay, everyone who has the stick can talk. Dope.
On the count of three, everyone say
One,
thank you,
thank you.
Yeti. One,
One,
two, three.
Thanks,
thank
Yeti.
you.
We would be the best kindergarten class.
I
Amen.
think I'd be a really good kindergartner.
Yeah, me too. I got the brain for one, so
I would not. I would be the devil. The teacher would hate me.
Anyways, thank you, Yeti, so much. You're a gem. A lot of us look up to you. Like, not gonna lie, I watch champs mostly because I like your observing. So, like, I learn a lot when I watch you observe. So, yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Honor.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, anytime. And you guys, and if you ever want any advice, ever want me to check out some vods or like give some feedback, like, don't hesitate to just ask. Always an open book.
Yeti's chill. He's a homie. So, thank you. Okay, everyone, go to